4,000 years ago, while much of the world was still scattered in small villages, a remarkable civilization quietly flourished along the banks of the Indus River. The Harappan civilization, also known as the Indus Valley Civilization. When British engineers laying railway tracks across Punjab in the 1850s used ancient fired bricks from mysterious mounds as ballast, not knowing they were dismantling a 4,000-year-old city, they accidentally introduced the world to one of its greatest forgotten civilizations. The formal excavations that began at Harappa in 1921 and Mohenjo-Daro shortly after revealed something that rewrote ancient history. Flourishing between roughly 3300 BCE and 1300 BCE, the Indus-Sarasvati Civilization spanned parts of modern-day Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan, making it geographically larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined at its peak. The mature phase alone covered over 2.6 million square kilometers, encompassing regions from Afghanistan to Maharashtra. And yet, for nearly a century after its discovery, it remained almost entirely absent from popular accounts of ancient civilizations. The pyramids got the documentaries, the Indus cities got the footnotes. That imbalance is finally beginning to correct itself. The single most astonishing achievement of the Indus-Sarasvati people, the one that still stops engineers and urban planners in their tracks, is their city design. Cities were laid out in grid patterns, forming highly organized, structured neighborhoods with advanced drainage and irrigation systems showcasing sophisticated engineering skills. This was not accidental. The grid layout required a central planning authority, people who decided, before a single brick was laid, where the streets would run, how wide they would be, and how the water would flow. Houses in Harappan cities were often two-storied, built with standardized baked bricks, and sophisticated drainage systems indicate a strong emphasis on hygiene and public health. The bricks themselves are a marvel. Across hundreds of sites separated by hundreds of miles, the ratio of brick dimensions, length to width to height, is almost universally consistent at 4 to 2 to 1. This is not coincidence. It is a civilization that had standardized its construction materials the way a modern country standardizes its electrical voltages. Someone, somewhere, made that decision, and it held across an empire for centuries. Here is an extraordinary fact that deserves to be stated plainly. The ancient Indus systems of sewerage and drainage developed and used in cities throughout the region were far more advanced than any found in contemporary urban sites in the Middle East, and even more efficient than those found in many areas of Pakistan and India today. Every major house in Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa was connected to a covered street drain. Wastewater flowed through brick-lined channels into larger municipal drains. Inspection holes were built into the system for maintenance. Compare this to ancient Rome, celebrated for its aqueducts, which only developed comparable infrastructure roughly 2,000 years later. A civilization that built public bathing infrastructure and covered sewage systems at this scale, at this date, was not primitive. It was, by any honest engineering measure, ahead of its time. A civilization only develops standardized weights and measurements when it has complex commerce. The Indus civilization was the first to implement the use of a standardized system of weights and measurements. Standardized weights in precise ratios of 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 were made of chert, a fine-grained stone, found consistently across sites from Harappa in Punjab to Lothal in Gujarat. Archaeologists note that Harappan engineers followed the decimal division of measurement for all practical purposes. This matters because it implies not just trade, but regulated trade, a system enforced across thousands of miles with enough institutional authority that merchants in distant cities used the same units. A touchstone-bearing gold streaks was found at Banawali, likely used for testing the purity of gold, a technique still used in parts of India today. The continuity across 4 millennia in that single detail is quietly stunning. Despite lacking grand palaces and tombs, the Indus Valley's achievements in metallurgy, crafts, and trade were significant. Copper and bronze artifacts, tools, weapons, and ornaments highlight the advanced metallurgical knowledge. The civilization was proficient in casting, forging, and other metalworking techniques, as evidenced by the variety and quality of metal artifacts. The presence of tin-bronze objects indicates trade with tin-producing regions in Afghanistan. Major copper and copper ore sources used by the civilization included the Khetri mines of Rajasthan and sources as far away as Oman and Bahrain. This means Indus metalworkers were sourcing raw materials from across an enormous geographic range, requiring trade networks, maritime routes, and diplomatic relationships with distant cultures. They were not just smelting metal, they were managing supply chains across the ancient world. Speaking of supply chains, the Indus-Sarasvati people were among the ancient world's great traders. The presence of precious stones like lapis lazuli and metals such as gold and silver in Indus Valley sites indicates trade with resource-rich regions in Afghanistan and Iran. Harappan seals have been found in Mesopotamia, and Mesopotamian texts refer to a place called Meluha, generally identified with the Indus region. And crucially, Lothal's dockyard provides direct evidence of maritime trade. A civilization with a dockyard, standardized weights, trade posts in 3 modern countries, and commercial relationships with Mesopotamia is not an isolated village culture. It is a Bronze Age economic superpower. Perhaps the most philosophically interesting achievement of the Indus-Sarasvati civilization is what it did not have. The Indus cities had no palaces or monumental structures like those in Egypt or Mesopotamia, suggesting a more egalitarian society, possibly the earliest sign of proto-democracy. No massive royal tombs, no war monuments, no images of kings triumphant in battle. There is no clear evidence of kingship or temples. The civilization was likely ruled by merchant oligarchies or priest administrators and was egalitarian in comparison to contemporary Mesopotamia, though housing differences suggest some degree of social stratification. Unlike the ancient civilizations of Egypt or Mesopotamia, all this appears to have been accomplished without any form of forced labor or slavery. Think about what this means. A civilization that built cities of 30,000 to 50,000 people maintained a trading empire spanning 3 nations and sustained this for over 1,000 years, apparently without a warrior king demanding tribute and sacrifice. That is not just unusual in ancient history, it may be unique. The spiritual life of the Indus-Sarasvati people is where the connection to Sanatan Dharma becomes most vivid and most debated. The Pashupati seal from Mohenjo-Daro shows a seated figure surrounded by animals, often interpreted as a proto-Shiva. Fire altars have been found at Kalibangan and Lothal. Evidence of worship of trees, particularly the peepal, animals including the bull, and phallic symbols resembling the Shiva lingam has been uncovered across multiple sites. Sir John Marshall and others described the Pashupati figure as having 3 faces and seated in a version of the cross-legged lotus posture of Hatha Yoga. Scholars of yoga, notably Karl Werner and Thomas Machiavelli, have used such seals to trace the roots of yoga practice to the Indus civilization. What is beyond reasonable dispute is that the spiritual vocabulary of the Indus people, the meditating figure, the sacred animals, the ritual fire, the venerated tree, the mother goddess, maps with remarkable precision onto the vocabulary of Sanatan Dharma as it developed over the following millennia. For decades, the dominant narrative held that the Vedic tradition was imported into India by migrating Central Asian peoples, with the Indus civilization representing a separate pre-Vedic cultural layer. Recent genetic findings have significantly complicated this picture. Rakhigarhi, often cited as the largest Harappan site in India, has yielded significant DNA evidence pointing to genetic continuity between the Harappan population and modern South Asians. A 2019 DNA study of skeletal remains found at Rakhigarhi, led by archaeologist Vasant Shinde, concluded that the individual had indigenous DNA, the same as that found across South Asia today, suggesting genetic continuity up to the present. Genetic research by scholars such as Dr. Lalji Singh supports the indigenous development of populations, challenging the simple Aryan migration theory. This has led some researchers to propose that the Harappan civilization may represent a material manifestation of Vedic culture rather than a distinct or foreign entity. This remains a live scholarly debate, but the evidence increasingly supports a story of continuity rather than replacement. Scholars estimate that less than 2% of a probable 2,600 known Indus-Sarasvati sites have been excavated, meaning that almost everything we know about this civilization comes from a tiny fraction of its physical remains. The largest site, Rakhigarhi, west of New Delhi, is thought to exceed 225 hectares, making it the largest Harappan site discovered in India to date. And yet it remains barely known outside specialist circles. For a skeptical audience, the Indus-Sarasvati civilization offers a corrective to a very specific kind of historical arrogance: the assumption that sophistication and civilization began in the Mediterranean and spread outward. Here, 5,000 years ago, in the river plains of what is now Pakistan and northwestern India, people were building planned cities with underground sewers, trading across 3 continents, measuring gold purity with touchstones, maintaining a civilization apparently free of slave labor and royal coercion, and leaving behind the earliest possible traces of meditation, fire ritual, and the sacred feminine that would later become the living heart of Sanatan Dharma. They left us no readable texts, but they left us their bricks, their drains, their seals, and their bones. And the bones, it turns out, are our bones too.